screen. So this is a very common problem that we encounter, presence of a pterygium. So how do we achieve refractive cataract surgery in the presence of pterygium? See, nowadays the patients who are undergoing cataract surgery, they demand superlative visual performance after the cataract and with the least dependence on glasses. Now, if we are tackling a patient who has a pterygium along with a cataract, how do I know if it has an impact on my IOL power calculations? And if so, what do I do? So when we do the preoperative evaluation, and we do a very extensive preoperative evaluation to reach the refractive status that we want of the patient. So not only do we need a good biometry, we need to choose the correct IOL for this patient, but we also need to evaluate the pterygium in great detail by the site, the size of the pterygium, and the grade of the pterygium. So the preoperative evaluation includes a detailed history. Does this patient know that he has a pterygium? How long is the pterygium been in the eye? What is the visual requirement of this patient? How active is this patient? Does this patient drive? Does this patient have very fine visual requirements? The status of the fellow eye, which is very important. And of course, you can never undermine the effect of the counseling of a patient. So what are the options that we have? In the presence of pterygium, should we operate only the cataract, leave the pterygium alone? Do we operate the pterygium first and then the cataract? And the cataract with the pterygium combined surgery, is that prudent? So let's see the different case scenarios. These are our own cases whom we have operated. So this is a 76-year-old gentleman who's come for cataract surgery. He's retired, leads a sedentary life, doesn't have very demanding visual requirements. And we are going to leap upon this nice grade 3 juicy cataract, and we might actually miss the little villain lurking nearby. This is a long-standing pterygium, and the patient knows that he has a pterygium. Sometimes in our haste to go ahead with the cataract surgery, we may miss these kind of pterygia. And this is, you can see it's a thin avascular pterygium, and you can make out that it's a long-standing, causing a little bit of a scarring there. Now, is this going to impact my K readings? So measuring keratometry is the most important first step in our biometry. Ideally, in such cases, if you have noted that there is a pterygium, ideally more than one keratometer should be done. And both the readings should be reliable and repeatable and in sync with each other. So what we like to do is any pterygium usually always gives rise to some kind of an astigmatism. So we want to know the magnitude and the axis. So we like to use a manual keratometer, which we do ourselves. It gives us a lot of information. You can use the autokeratometry, and we rely heavily on the optical biometers. So the keratometry which you get from a Lenstar or the IOL Master, we rely on that. But not only the magnitude and the axis, we want to know whether the astigmatism is regular. So for that, an additional topography at least should be done to find out if the astigmatism is regular. So these are the manual keratometry Myers. If the Myers are regular, if they can be superimposed accurately on each other, that means you know it's a regular astigmatism. And look for the bow tie pattern on a topography to find out if the astigmatism is regular. Now in this patient, we got the magnitude of astigmatism approximately 1 diopter. And this is the eye trace aberrometry reading. We find this a very useful tool. You can see the hemimeridional flattening where the pterygium is. And this pterygium also not only gives rise to an astigmatism of 1 diopter, it is giving rise to, but it is also giving rise to these aberrations. So very commonly, there are higher order aberrations that a pterygium causes, and this is a coma and trefoil that you can see. These are the corneal aberrations. This is the corneal aberration profile on the wavefront aberrometry. So this is a very useful tool for us to get the aberrometry profile of a patient, even with such a small atrophic pterygium. There are many studies which show that the pterygium has and its size have significant influence on higher order aberrations of the eye, especially on the measured total coma and total trefoil, as we can see in this patient. So my IOL selection, I have reliable K readings, and I know that it is not a very large astigmatism, but it is an irregular astigmatism. My IOL power, I'm going to try and predict so that I don't leave behind any residual spherical refractive error, but I know I'm going to leave behind a 1 diopter of astigmatism. There is going to be certain ocular surface disturbances. So my choice of IOL will be a simple non-aspheric IOL like an SA6080. Why not an aspheric? See, we are going to leave behind any refractive error that you are going to leave behind. It is not a good idea to implant an aspheric or a multifocal or a toric because the patient has an irregular astigmatism, the patient has higher order aberrations. So the quality of vision is going to get deteriorated with any of these three IOLs. So an ideal lens for this patient would be a non-aspheric, and the patient was very happy with the aspheric lens implanted. Now coming to the second scenario, this first one where we have left the pterygium alone, the second is a stage surgery. In which cases would we do a pterygium surgery first? So there are many studies which show that a pterygium excision can significantly reduce most of the pterygium-induced higher order aberrations that we saw earlier. Topographic changes after primary pterygium excision are associated with the pterygium size, and a pterygium advancing over the pupillary area may require almost 6 to 12 months for corneal topography restoration. Please note that this is a very, very significant point when you're planning a pterygium and a cataract surgery. So let's consider this second case of a 57-year-old female who has a very fleshy pterygium. Now she wants a combined surgery of a cataract and a pterygium. Because this is very fleshy and it is a pterygium of not a very long-term onset, it is a recent onset, it is a fleshy vascular pterygium. So let's see how this pterygium is causing a very, very high astigmatism. If you can see the tracy astigmatism, it's causing almost a 4 diopter of astigmatism and the higher order aberrations that you can see in the form of coma and trefoil. Okay, so we counseled her for a pterygium surgery first. You can see that the cataract is not too advanced. We counseled her and said that she would benefit by doing a pterygium surgery first. And we did a pterygium surgery with a conjunctival autograft. She was also happy cosmetically for the surgery. And then after 3 months, we planned the cataract surgery. Not only did her astigmatism reduce from 4 diopters to 2 diopters, it became a more or less regular astigmatism. And therefore, we planned her a toric IOL. And the patient was counseled about the post-operative surface symptoms, lubricating drops given for a longer time, and post-operatively uncorrected visual acuity was 6/9, and the patient was very happy. So if pterygia are small too and they do not impact the K readings, they can be left alone. If they are large enough to adversely affect your keratometry readings, remove the pterygium first and then plan for the cataract surgery, and wait for a minimum of 6 to 8 weeks before planning the cataract surgery. Let's take this third case, a 58-year-old female with a large recurred pterygium. The primary pterygium surgery was done in 1996. And after that, this pterygium has recurred and she has been living with this for the last 15 years. Her best corrected visual acuity is finger counting 2 meters. Now, unless and until this pterygium is removed, and now she has come to us for the cataract surgery. So unless and until we remove this pterygium, we will not be able to plan the cataract surgery. So this is after the cataract, this is after the pterygium surgery with expert guidance from Dr. Fogla, where we had to do a very large conjunctival grafting. But ideally, this is the patient in spite of having an operable cataract, we need to keep a close watch. We told her that we would wait for 6 months for this corneal topography to stabilize. The last case, this is a patient, a 65-year-old male with a cataract who did not want pterygium surgery. This is a very long-standing long-standing pterygium that he had. And please note that his mesopic pupil was only 2.5 millimeters, and maximum this was the pupil that was dilated. The other significant thing was his other eye, which was operated elsewhere. He has a best corrected vision of 624 with a full thickness macular hole. You can see the iris atrophy. Now, don't be compelled to put a multifocal. This is not a candidate for multifocal, and because we are leaving this large pterygium, and you can see over here with the topograph, the pentacam readings, that he has almost a 5 to 6 diopter of astigmatism. But in this small pupillary area, which he has a very small pupil, if you can see, this dotted line is his pupillary area. Within that pupillary area, he has a more or less regular astigmatism. So we did a large T9 correcting toric IOL, and the patient had 6/6 with a residual minimal refractive astigmatism, and patient was very happy. So only in special conditions you should do
Really
a
sorry
combined
to interrupt,
cataract.
ma'am.
Yes. The use of postoperative steroids can delay healing and avoid treating it as a refractive surgery if you're going to combine a cataract and pterygium. So in many cases, we do not combine the cataract and pterygium surgeries. And pterygia do lead to deterioration of quality of visual performance, and they increase ocular wavefront aberrations. So each patient has to be dealt with as a separate case and customize the visual requirements for each patient. Thank you so much.